Yeah, and you even got to see this other Raj side of me, or just had a disruption at the house. And it is that flexing the muscle of when people do not respect boundaries. And but I think it's good to show that side of ourselves, and then also how we move through disruption or chaos or uncertainty or
Yes.
frustration. That's really important.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I was actually just talking to my friend today about how like when I get irritable, I like resort back to this younger version of myself that was always pissed off about everything. And I've got to like realize like it's actually like my irritability. It's the things that are making me irritated or stressing me out. I'm not actually this like hothead that's gonna lose their shit every time something goes wrong. So it's a good reminder to kind of be like, all right, sometimes we just got to take a step back, take a deep breath, and know that we are not that person that maybe other people are how they're impacting us.
I think also it's important that we learn to stop judging ourselves so harshly or gaslighting ourselves, and that our anger is a gift, and it
Mm,
shows us where our values are being compromised, and it shows us where our boundaries are being overstepped. And so I think it's we can learn from it. And for me, I'm trying to get to a place where I never, under any circumstances, unless I'm being like physically attacked or something, have to scream or raise my voice because the person isn't listening.
oh yeah.
But I think we need to let ourselves off the hook a little bit, or just say, okay, or this bothers me. It's not even so, yes, this situation is upsetting, but it goes back in my case to not feeling heard as a child or
Hmm.
in some relationships. And so you're like, okay, they're not hearing me. Let me try again. Still not hearing me. In fact, they're even resisting and pushing back and ignoring. So then we're even more inflamed. And so it's like,
Yes.
oh, it's just a natural human instinct. Even the lions are roaring, to get your attention. It's like, oh, I guess I have to yell or scream for this person to hear me, which we know that doesn't work either.
No, and that reminds me some of my childhood too, where it would just be people trying to scream louder than the person before them. It's just yeah, not a good way to communicate. But it is when people like don't want to hear you. It is very frustrating. It gets I get particularly frustrated when someone doesn't want to hear me and then consequently also talks to me like I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't speak very often unless I know the topic or unless I'm knowledgeable or it's about something that I personally feel or believe in. And so when you're kind of coming at communication or something you are sharing from a place of knowledge, expertise, it's just how you're feeling and people don't see you and people don't hear you and people don't acknowledge that that is where I hit my tipping point and then I'm yelling.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's healthy. I think the aftermath of it, at least for me, is then I feel bad because I don't want to yell at anybody, myself or
Hmm.
anybody, whether I care about the person or not. It never feels good. And then it's like we've
The
kind of
guilt.
stooped to their low vibration. And right, it's that guilt, it's that shame. It's I know better. I'm more mature than this. I'm more emotionally intelligent than this. But again, I think it goes back to that self-compassion and grace, and just like we'll see how we handle it next time. But um
I was
it
just
is. I
gonna
think
say
we all
that.
need to give ourselves that hug because life is challenging, and we're managing so much. I don't even think we realize the full scope of the stuff that we manage or
Hmm.
micromanage or macro manage on a daily basis. And we're also exhausted. And I don't think we're really talking about how exhausted we are. And I don't even think just like I'm exhausted because I worked a 12-hour day. We're
Hmm.
exhausted from the insanity of the world. And then
An
the
overstimulus.
Yes, and then those can like it's creating that in other people. So when you go to have a meaningful or calm or loving interaction with someone, they're not even capable or available for that based on all the caca of the world that we're talking about.
I couldn't agree more. I find myself like sometimes the most simple to do is the hardest because I'm just like I have so much going on in my head and so much going on around me that I'm looking at like send this email as a Mount Everest climb because I think we're also overstimulated and we've got social media, we've got text messages, we've got we're the channels of communication and information coming at you, you don't even have much control over anymore, right? Because you're getting social notifications, text messages, phone calls, emails, personal emails, work emails, Teams chats, Slack chats, Zoom calls, Teams calls, people messaging you through WhatsApp. And I mean, it's just, if you stop and think about the channels that people have access to you, and you don't even necessarily have control over it sometimes. Like, I know I shut off all my social media notifications. That was a game changer. But like, I can't stop someone from texting me. I can't stop someone from messaging me at work or sending an email. Like, I looked on my emails earlier today, and I was in a 1 hour meeting. I came back to 22 emails, and it's like, what the hell's going on? And so then it's like shifting your mindset is exhausting as well, because you're using different parts of your brain in work, in doing something like this, or communicating with your friends or your family. And it's just so much information, and our minds aren't built through evolution to handle what's happened to the way we communicate in the last like 20 years. It's just all happened so fast.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we talk about this. I think the first step in overcoming any problem or solving any problem is first acknowledging that there is a problem, and admitting I am worn out, I'm burnt out, I'm overwhelmed, I'm exhausted. I'm no longer willing to put up with this, or whatever that truth is for ourselves. And then rather than dwelling there, we first have to acknowledge it and talk to a trusted friend, coach, therapist, um,
Mm-hmm.
and not just ourselves, and stuff it down, because that's what I did. What do? We stuff it down with food, alcohol, drugs, sex, shopping, whatever your vice is. So talking about it, and then doing what we're doing, showing up for each other, creating a space for whomever is listening to really show up for themselves. And maybe at dinner tonight, instead of talking about what's for dinner, or what the kids did at school, or who's going to pay the bills, maybe start with a deeper, more meaningful question to then therefore have a deeper, more meaningful conversation. But start admitting these things, and like, okay, what am I going to do about this? Okay, I'm going to turn off my notifications. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to take every Friday afternoon off. I'm going to, whatever your thing is, start journaling. But I find, even,
Yes.
we had a frustration right before we hit record, and then, thank you for just, we talked about it for a minute, and I'm like, okay, I'm good. Because as my coach says, when I used to say to her, I would say, I'm so frustrated, and she would say, you get to be. And then once someone tells me that I
Ooh.
get to be frustrated, I think, well, I don't have to be frustrated anymore. But what do most people do to us? They say, oh, just get over it, let it go, it's not that big of a deal, who cares? Or they might even say, I'm sorry, that sucks. But I think when we just allow ourselves and allow others to just feel whatever we're feeling in the moment, we can move through it really quickly.
I think you're spot on with that, and the validation that you get from that, and I had something last week. I remember I was very angry about it. I actually popped a blood vessel in my eye
Oh,
because I
no.
think I was just, and I don't get angry very often anymore. Like, I'll get frustrated and irritable, but I like popped a blood vessel in my eye. It looked like someone popped me in the eye, and I just remember I walked in to my therapist, and I was like, I'm like really fucking pissed about this. And this is really frustrating me and like sitting with me. And she's like, well, that's okay. That's a totally normal thing to be angry about. And I just felt I let it go within minutes of after that. And so it is true. And I think too, like a lot of times when we have negative emotions, I don't, I know I isolate, I withdraw and isolate because I don't want to put that on other people. And I think that's toxic. Like, that's not a good way to be. If you're frustrated and angry, like, find someone you can be frustrated and angry with that's going to help you feel validated and give you space to like talk about it and get it out, instead of balling it up inside and waiting for it to grow when something else pisses you off.
Yeah, and I think even the most well-intentioned parents, they weren't taught about emotional regulation. They weren't taught to talk about feelings, or just happy. It's like happy is the only thing that we should all be or aspire to. Otherwise, there's something quote unquote wrong with us.
Wrong with
And
you.
how
Yeah.
beautiful our sadness is, and our anger and our grief, and to be able to feel those things and feel the full spectrum of emotions. And I think that's another inspiration behind the show that I've created, Rawish, because I want to have us all experience raw emotion and talk about these things. It makes us healthier people, deeper, richer
Yes.
people. And these emotions need to live outside of the body instead of stuffing it down, or, everyone's pretending they've got it all together, or everything's fine. And we're just sucking it up to get through the workday, or to show up in our marriage, or as parents, rather than taking even 5 minutes to reflect on how upset we are. Reflect on, okay, this marriage isn't working. Reflect on,
Mhm.
I do need to leave this job, or I do need to move, or I do need to establish healthier boundaries, regardless of how much it disappoints people. So while you and I aren't doctors or therapists, I feel like we have the street cred in this and
Experience.
the experience and to talk about this. And I hope whomever is listening is just able to let themselves off the hook, to see themselves and feel validated and our feelings or frustration. And we were even talking about, I locked myself out of the house the other day because I think we're trying to do too much and we're going too
Mhm.
fast. And I feel like all the mistakes I've made in my life are when I was going too fast. And so slowing down,
Ooh,
taking a breath,
breathing.
taking a pause. After you listen to this, I hope you can even take 2 minutes to just sit and stare out the window, reflect on what we said, reflect on how you're feeling, and check in with yourself daily and ask, how are you doing?
Thank you for listening to this clip from the full episode of Eyes Wide Open. Please like and subscribe for daily clips and new episodes that drop every Tuesday. I appreciate you.